Welcome to our final episode of our series, The Journey After Birth. I'm Elizabeth Vowell, and I'm an anchor and reporter at WAFB TV and a new mom. In this series, we've been talking about some of the parts of motherhood that don't get a lot of attention. You know, the things that you don't post about on Facebook. But these are important topics that all moms need to feel like they can talk about. So we partnered with the experts at Women's Hospital to get that conversation going. Today, we're talking about something really tough. Pregnancy loss. It is something that every expecting mom fears, even when your pregnancy is perfectly healthy. It's also something that still carries a lot of shame and even guilt, even though 1 in 4 women will miscarry. In this episode, we talked to the incredible Jessica Morris. She's a labor and delivery nurse at Women's, but she also shared her own experience of miscarrying and how she's worked to find some healing and purpose.
WAFB's The Journey After Birth with Elizabeth Vowell, sponsored by Women's Hospital.
So on today's subject, we're going to be talking about something that is very difficult to talk about. It's still kind of a taboo subject. We're talking about miscarriages and pregnancy loss. It's something that affects a lot of women. We have Jessica Morris with us here today. You're the nurse manager for labor and delivery. Give me a little bit about your background.
Sure. I've been at Women's Hospital for almost 14 years. I've been a nurse for 16. I have always worked in labor and delivery here. So labor and delivery has been my passion. Obstetrical nursing really, but labor and delivery is where I found my home. I was one of the charge nurses for a little while after staff nurse, and then the nurse manager role came up and I jumped in and they picked me, and here I am. So I work on several committees in the hospital. One of the ones that is really dear to my heart, close to my heart, I have a lot of passion for, is our Perinatal Palliative Care Committee. So I sit on that committee with members of the labor and delivery team, the NICU team, which is our neonatal intensive care, our social work team. We have a chaplain that sits on our team, maternal fetal medicine, Dr. Sandomal, who's a huge proponent to our committee and our program as a whole. So we have really, over the last 6 years, kind of expanded and have done outreach with community. We've, partnered with different organizations like Anna's Grace Foundation. So last year, gosh, we had over 22. Well, I say last year. I forget. 2020 is a
It's
wash.
a blur.
Yeah. So in past years, we've had over 20 volunteers to show up for Anna's Grace events. Their foundation is really close to our hearts. It touches our patients after they leave our hospital. So they touch us, they leave such big footprints on our hearts while they're here that we just kind of want to make sure that they see that we're out there into the community and they have the support that they need. And Anna's Grace does that for them.
So what is Anna's Grace Foundation?
Anna's Grace is a nonprofit. It was started by Anna's mom and dad, Monica Alley. She actually experienced a loss. So a second trimester loss, had to go through labor and delivery. She had children already, so she had already experienced the labor and delivery part, but having to do it in this sense, and not leaving the hospital with a baby this time, and then also having to explain that to her other children was difficult to her. So her mission or ministry, as I like to call it, because it really is, it's touched so many people, was how could she help after? So nobody prepares you for funeral cost. Postpartum support afterwards. Postpartum depression is a real thing, but after experiencing a loss, you're at such a higher risk. So she has reached out to local support groups, local churches. She works with local foundations, and they provide those financial needs for families, supportive needs for families after loss. So like I said, it's like our patients leave us and we kind of want to make sure that they're transitioning out, after they've experienced that loss. And so this foundation's really just kind of that extension to help kind of get through that not the final step, but the next step.
And so this is something you're very passionate about because you've experienced a pregnancy loss.
Right. So I experienced a first trimester loss. So I was 9 weeks. It's my first pregnancy. So just as a newlywed and, just having talk, I feel like we just recently had this conversation. Everybody asks, when you get married, when are you going to have a baby?
Right.
So my husband at the time, we're no longer together, but my husband at the time, we had tried for over a year and a half. So it wasn't like we weren't, thinking about starting a family. But the milestones that people expect of you, or that society expects of you, is marriage, then baby, right? First comes marriage, then comes the baby.
Yeah. And if there's any kind of time between that, then people are going, what are you waiting for?
Yes, yes. What are you doing? Or what's wrong with you?
Right.
Right? So we got pregnant, and I was super surprised. I didn't tell him at first because I didn't believe it myself. So actually went to the doctor. She confirmed. I came back home and then had a little gift bag. It was just, it was exciting for us. We were, it was new and it was exciting. So we got to share that moment together. And then, unfortunately, we went in for an ultrasound. We hadn't seen the growth that was expected during the time. So it was, don't worry, live your life, come back in 2 weeks and we'll see it, right? It'll be there. It's just behind, your dates are behind or whatnot. So when we came in for that second ultrasound, that's when we didn't see the heartbeat. So we had known that, at that moment that we lost the pregnancy. So that journey in itself was, being a labor and delivery nurse and having sat with a mom that has experienced a full-term loss, I didn't know which way to go. Yeah, it was my own loss, but gosh, it wasn't as much of a loss as her loss. Or, what about the mom that has a baby in the NICU for months on end, and then she loses that baby? What about that mom? Gosh, is my pain the same as her pain, or her pain? It's that comparison that you do, of course, as women. But then it's also you try to have empathy for them, but at the same time, how do I feel what I'm feeling? I still had the same feeling. I still had a due date. I still thought that I was going to have this little brown-headed girl running around, So all of those thoughts and feelings I still had to process through. And I can tell you, it took me a long time to process through that.
Yeah.
And then getting pregnant after a loss with my daughter, gosh, that pregnancy, I was on edge the entire time.
I can imagine.
Is this going to be it? Am I going to go in for this appointment? Is this going to be the appointment that they're going to tell me that, I know I'm no longer pregnant, or my baby no longer has a heartbeat. So that entire pregnancy was a whirlwind. Not only on top of that, but working in a labor and delivery where you see all of the highs and you see all of the lows, and you think everything's going to happen to you. So that pregnancy, I enjoyed it, but it was a little rough, I had my waves. Yes. And then afterwards, after I delivered Addison, my daughter, gosh, it was, such an emotional roller coaster, because here she was, and here I'm bringing her home with me, and I have her. But what would it have been like if I would have brought her home and she would have had an older sister or an older brother? So it's still those thoughts that sit in your mind.
There's a big what if.
Oh gosh,
everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere. And she wasn't my first pregnancy. She was she's my firstborn, but she wasn't. So there's a lot that comes with that, but
yeah, you wrote a very beautiful blog for Anna's Grace Foundation, and you talked about some of the emotions that you went through after that, especially being, as you said, a labor and delivery nurse.
Yes.
So you're watching other women either successfully give birth or as you say, go home with a baby, and some who maybe don't. So you talked about feeling shame because of your loss. You felt about being lonely, about people not really understanding how to support you afterwards, and also, as you kind of touched on it, that do I have a right to grieve this?
Right. That was one of the biggest, I had to realize that for myself, that I did have the right to grieve. The shame comes with the pressure that is put on a woman in society to be a mom. So you are to be a wife and then be a mom, and then here is this pressure of this, picture perfect what you're supposed to look like, right? And gosh, there's so much out there about, what not to do and what to do and those kind of things. But just knowing that as a woman, I was expected to be a mom and I couldn't fulfill that, right? So the shame that comes with, is it me? Like, was it me? Was I not able to carry a pregnancy? Was I not able to be, that woman and be a mom? That shame that came with not being able to have the pregnancy. And then the shame that followed, or the guilt, which I really didn't do anything wrong, but the guilt that followed, that I was only 9 weeks and you were 39 weeks and you were, had a 9-month-old. So, gosh, how could I experience the same loss that you experienced? But it still hurt. It still hurt a lot.
Yeah.
And it still took a lot to go through and to talk about and to process. So yeah, that shame. But realizing that it was a loss and giving myself permission to write that blog and to put my words down on paper, it was pretty eye-opening to myself to read it out loud and kind of feel what I was feeling. It was really emotional. It was really tough to write it, but to listen to my words when I read it out loud was even more. It was harder, but it was so therapeutic at the same time. And I got so many people that reached out to me and said, thank you for putting your words down. Like, those are my words. That's what I would like to say. I was just overwhelmed, because those were, those were my feelings. But to know that there's women out there that I gave permission to say, yes, I had a loss. Yes, I can grieve. I'm giving you that out to say, yeah, I this is me and this is my story. So,
because as miscarriages are very common. What is this? Is it 1 in 4?
1 in 4 women will experience a miscarriage.
So why don't we talk about this more? If this is something that so many women go through and they feel like they have to carry this burden by themselves, why do we make them carry it by themselves?
Gosh, I don't know. Gosh, I really don't. I don't know. And I know it from my own family. So my mom actually had a stillborn. So I am one of 6. I have 2 brothers, 2 sisters now, but the baby. But she had a stillborn, and my family, we really don't talk about him. Like, he didn't have a name, so he's Baby Derbies, but he is buried. He does have a headstone. So he was a life, he mattered, and he mattered to my mom and my dad. My siblings, were too young to understand what was happening, but nobody really talked about it. And then my sister, one of my really close sisters that I'm close with, she had a miscarriage. And I remember when she told us that she was pregnant, and we were all so excited. And then, when she told us that she had lost the pregnancy, we were like, well, why? So it's just that, and of course I was younger at the time and didn't understand all the ins and outs and stuff, but to know that she never really talked about it after that, because she got pregnant, she had a baby after that, after the loss. I do remember her comforting me in my loss, and her words to me that meant the most were, it's not your fault. And I could hear her saying that to herself, and I could hear myself telling that to other people too. It's not your fault, because I've had friends that have experienced losses. You don't know what to say to them, and it's okay. And I think it's okay if someone would have came to me and said, I really don't know what to say. I would have been like, I know. What are you going to say?
Right.
Right. I get it, but just to know that you acknowledge that what I'm going through, acknowledge the loss, acknowledge that there was hope there, that there was going to be a life there. Just acknowledge that, just to say, gosh, it's really hard for you to go through. I can't imagine what you're going through. If you need anything, I'm here, or let me pick you up a burger. Let me pick you up write you a note just in the middle of the day to say that I'm thinking about you. Just those different things.
Well, and you bring up some great points, because I think, what is the best way to support somebody if you know someone who's gone through a pregnancy loss?
I think being completely open and transparent, and being able to say, I have no idea what to say. I don't have the words for you, but I know that I want you to know that I'm here. And I want you to know that I understand what you're going through, that you're going through a loss, you're going to need some time. And that it's going to take you a minute, you may not be okay, and that's okay. but I can sit here and be in it with you. So I feel like that's probably the most powerful thing.
Yeah. I think because it is such a taboo subject that people maybe don't bring it up because they don't know how to. They don't know how to have that conversation.
Right.
So talk to me about the perinatal palliative care.
Now is the time for new beginnings, for holding each other's hands, for encouraging each other, and for working together. At Woman's, our mission is to improve the health of all women and infants. So today, we're focused on new ways to care for you and keep you safe. Because seeing you healthy and strong is important to us.
Talk to me about the perinatal palliative care. Another thing that I thought was really interesting with your blog was part of your job is to go into other facilities to say, here's how you can support these women in a better way.
Right. So we keep talking about taking this show on the road, but we don't have all the logistics yet or the time. Sometimes it seems like time is like, where is the time? But our team has gone through training. Gosh, we've been all over the country to do training. We went to Minnesota, to Boston, to California, because there's not really an established perinatal program. So there's a lot with adult palliative care, end-of-life, hospice care. There's a lot with cancer patients. So there's a lot with pediatrics in that sense, with cancer or life-limiting serious illness, terminal illnesses. But there's nothing really out there for perinatal. So for a mom that comes in for her 20-week appointment for her anatomy scan, I'm going to find out what I'm having. She, in that appointment, finds out that the baby has some type of serious illness, life-limiting diagnosis, and that it probably will not make it through the pregnancy, or if it does make it through the pregnancy, it probably won't live that long after delivery. So in that moment, all of her hopes and dreams for this pregnancy, right, for this normal pregnancy, this normal child to go to first grade, to graduate from high school, to walk down the aisle, all of those things come crashing in that one appointment. So our team is there to kind of guide her through that information gathering. What does this look like? How do I celebrate this pregnancy for what it's worth? It's a life, and how do I celebrate this life? So our team will then sit down with her and her family, and we will go through what the expectations look like if the baby will stay in our neonatal intensive care unit, or if it won't. We will go through what delivery looks like. And it may be a couple of appointments. So that first appointment, she may not be ready to kind of discuss all that. Let me absorb everything. Please don't go on Google and look up anything. Like, just come back to us with your questions. But, it's inevitable when you type in your phone to see what am I looking at? What am I facing? But she may come back, her and her family will come back the second or third time. We get to form that relationship with them throughout their pregnancy. So they know that they have a support net, like, to catch them, right? Because we may not have all the answers, but we do know we can find answers for you, and if not, we can look for them together. So let's figure out what your wishes are for this pregnancy, for this delivery, and for your baby's life after delivery. Like, what does that look like to you? So we'll set up things with them, different meetings. During COVID, we had to do that during Zoom, through Zoom. So it was a little harder, but now we are, starting back to do in-person meetings, and we're able to come up with a plan, a birth plan. So when you're pregnant and you're trying to figure out, you're going to birth classes and you're going to laboring classes, and you're just trying to figure out this whole pregnancy thing and what does delivery look like. We want them to, experience the same things. So we've actually given people advice to celebrate holidays. Like, we've had moms paint their bellies like a pumpkin for Halloween and do trick-or-treating because, that baby may not, next year will not be able to do trick-or-treating. Or, Christmas, or, Father's Day, Mother's Day, those different things. Just celebrate the small milestones now, so that you'll have those memories of that life afterwards. So we are trying to to kind of package all of that together and go to different hospitals and say, hey, look, this is our perinatal palliative care program. This is what we do for our moms at our hospital. And this is, the care that you can provide here as well. If that's not an option for them financially or staffing, whatnot, we still have the program here at Woman's. So, we can still give them advice over the phone or email what they may need. We do share a lot of emails between hospitals because we do a lot of memory making. So handprints, footprints, locks of hair. We do molds, hand molds for like Christmas ornaments, or we have done heartbeat recorders. So at Build-A-Bear, the little heartbeat recorders.
Right.
So we've started to do that for some of our families here. So in their perinatal appointment, we will record the fetal heart rate in the, through the recorder, and they'll have that to hold and to kind of leave the hospital with, a little piece of their baby.
So it sounds like it's making sure you recognize, and as you said, recognize and celebrate this life. Don't just pretend like this didn't happen. It was just a bump in the road, but really kind of leaning into the fact that this life was here, even as, no matter how brief.
No matter how brief, it mattered. And it was important. It was important to you, and it's important to us that we honor that.
So in talking about recovery for a woman after she's gone through a pregnancy loss, because not only are you dealing with the grieving and the emotions that go with that, you're also dealing with the hormones that your body went through, and physically your body is still recovering from a pregnancy, and you're having to do all of this without the baby.
Right.
How difficult is that?
Oh gosh. We try to make sure that we explain all of those things to mom. So you're still, unfortunately, going to be producing breast milk. You're going to, have cramps, and, if your delivery was a C-section, you're going to have your C-section scar, and, you're still going to have to worry about infection risk and those kind of things. So not only do you leave with the emotional scars, but you're also leaving with physical scars as well. So we try to prepare them as much as we can. We have had moms donate their milk to donor banks, which has been really just something that they feel like, this is something that I can do in the moment. Not everyone is that prepared at the time of a loss, but those who have had time to process and look into it, just as a feeling of leaving the legacy of that life, right, of her baby. So this is what I can do to make sure that another mom or, another baby is taken care of, and it was because of this life, right? I'm able to produce breast milk because I was pregnant with this life. So let me, share that with someone else. We've had moms that have started their own nonprofit foundation, so trying to take care of other moms. They have given us like little support packages, things that nobody thinks about when you get the diagnosis in the office that you're either, about to deliver, your baby doesn't have a heartbeat, you're going to go home, you're not going to have, your baby to walk out with, so let me take care of you. Just simple things like, I forgot a chapstick. What about a hairband? What about, I have all of these questions and I can't get them out of my head. Here's a pen and a pad, write them down. And, we'll go in and out and we'll answer all of those questions for you. Socks. Here's some fluffy socks. A candle or lavender or just something.
Little comforts.
Yes, just something to say, I'm thinking of you and I was in your shoes and it's going to be okay. Just that small little task. So those are really special to us.
What about support for partners? Because obviously, as a woman, you are the one who physically experiences this loss, but it's also a loss for your partner as well.
It sure is. It sure is. So there are support groups that Woman's has our social workers put on at the wellness center. So I know that they invite moms. I'm not really sure how many times the partners actually come with the moms. Most of the time, if the partner is a male, it's really hard for them not to fix the situation and kind of like say, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do it like this, and then this, then we have to go home, and then we have to do this. It's really hard for them to kind of stop and feel. So I know that our team, our labor and delivery team, and our NICU team make a special effort to make sure that we're panning the room and we're looking at everybody that's in the room. and let me let you be involved in this. Like, let me let you be involved in the memory making, in the bath, in the last rite, in the baptism, whatever that might be for you, so that you can feel like, you know, you're a part of that as well, because you're processing through it. We want to include you. We want to make sure that you feel included and that you don't feel excluded too. But outside of the hospital, I know that there are church groups that do grief share, and we will, you know, I know Anna's Grace does a lot with support groups as well, but we'll refer them to support groups at their, you know, local churches. We have little brochures and stuff like that. I would love to do more as a hospital for partners for grief as well.
So what about resources for women if they have experienced a miscarriage, no matter where that falls within the pregnancy? Where can they go for help or support?
Well, of course, their OBGYN, you know, first off, you know, they have experience in, you know, pregnancy loss, in what that looks like for your body afterwards, after a pregnancy, and then preparing for if, you know, you decide for the next pregnancy. So I would first start with their doctor's offices. Our support services here, our social workers are phenomenal. They work very closely with Our Lady of the Lake chaplains who, you know, we kind of want to claim her as our own, but Martise Jones is one of, you know, the ones that sits on our palliative care team. Her spirit and presence is just amazing. Like, you know, when she walks in the room, you just kind of immediately feel calm. But we have those support services while you're here in-house. And then I know locally there are the support groups that meet at different churches and that gather. I am working very closely with Anna's Grace. We talked about that, but they're also working closely with St. George and Carriers for Hope, which is another nonprofit. It is a husband and a wife that experienced a loss and had to figure out how to bury their baby. So he made his baby's casket himself. So he has a group of people, of men that want to fix things and make everything better, come and volunteer their time and make these little wooden caskets free of charge for these families. So they're working very closely with St. George and Baton Rouge. So it's just, the different things are out there. It's just, you know, it's just asking and knowing. But you can always contact Women's Hospital Social Services, and they would give you, you know, all of those resources. And then, of course, you know, your OBGYN office, our maternal fetal medicine perinatologist here at Women's are used to dealing with women with complex diagnosis for their pregnancies. So they're a great resource too.
Well, Jessica, is there anything else that you know, if there was any message that a mom who is experiencing loss needs to hear, what would it be?
Gosh, I just want them to know that it is okay to grieve. It is okay to experience the feelings. I know it hurts, and loss and grief is hard work. So when you're doing the hard work, you have to remember to take care of yourself. Give yourself permission to grieve, to do the work, and then to take care of yourself. You know, I think that's the most important thing that I would say.
Absolutely. All right, Jessica Morris, thank you very much for sharing your story, and thanks for talking with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe to WAFB's YouTube channel for more great podcasts.